All right. My name is, again, first of all, thank you guys for coming out this evening. My name is Jonathan Wicker. I've also got my partner, Kaylee Price, on with us. Kaylee and I are both financial advisors who work in the school district, mainly in the 403B space, but we're also doing financial planning and other aspects of financial education for a lot of the school teachers. Last month, Kaylee and I started a new project of doing monthly webinars to try to educate the staffs in the school districts about different topics. Last month we did student loan forgiveness. This evening I'm very happy to have John Falleroni on with us from Duquesne University. John works in the financial aid department with them, and he's going to go over a little bit about the financial aid process applying to colleges. Any questions that you guys have during this presentation, there's a question box off to the right, or there should be a question box for you guys. Please feel free, put a question in. We'll stop. I'll ask John the questions, and then we'll kind of keep going through the presentation for you guys. If we're not able to get to any of your questions by the end of this presentation, still send them to me, email them to Kaylee and I, and then we will be more than happy to get back to you with some answers and answer those questions for you. So to start this evening off, as I said, I'm going to introduce John. He's going to come on and talk a little bit about financial aid. So again, John, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. Once again, I'm John Falleroni, Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid here at Duquesne University. And I'm really happy to be with you guys tonight. And my presentation tonight is called, Financial Aid, How Do I Start? And these presentations, they can, I know it's overwhelming. If you have questions, like let it wash over you and fire off questions in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them. So I know there's a lot of lofty goals that I have here, and here's some of them. I'm going to provide an ideal timeline for financial aid. Nothing works ideally, but we'll give you the ideal timeline for financial aid. We hope by going through an ideal timeline, it kind of explains, and you get ideas of how financial aid works. We're going to explain financial aid programs that are available in higher ed. Take a look at the FAFSA. We're going to define need-based aid. Everybody has need when they go to college, but only the government can define need, and we'll explain how that works. We're going to review some non-need-based programs as well as need-based aid programs, and I hope to provide you with some additional resources to help you out for college planning and give you some food for thought. To understand something complex, I start with a schema to organize things. And I think the financial aid cycle may help to organize all these things that are going on in the world of financial aid. You can see from this that the cycle starts in the autumn of your senior year. It's usually around that time that the financial aid process will actually start with you just applying to the schools of your choice. And I realize a lot of you, it's not fall, it's not autumn yet, and a lot of you have children that may be a long ways down the road. But just to give you an idea how it starts and to make you feel better about the process, we'll start with just saying, like, the first step is applying your senior year to a school, just getting admitted to the school. And once you do that, everything else just falls into place. I promise you, I swear, once you get admitted to the school, all those other things, like, oh, are they going to tell me when to do the FAFSA? Yes. Are they going to remind me? Yes. Are they, what should happen next? All those things just fall into place once you get admitted to the school. So like I said, it starts with, financial aid cycle starts with just applying to the school. And it's actually during the admissions process, the point of admissions, that financial aid will actually start. First of all, you can't get financial aid until you're admitted to the school. You can't be considered until you're admitted to the school. The next thing is, when, at least at Duquesne and a lot of other schools, when you are admitted and when the admissions office is viewing your application, they're looking at your SATs, your ACTs, your class rank, and they're determining not only if they could admit the student, but they're also looking and considering academic scholarships and discounts. This is what we mean by it's not need-based. This comes in from just applying the scholarships. They're looking at the type of student and the grades, and all those things go into determining scholarships. So the first step of being admitted actually a lot of times brings in a lot of aid at that point. And for many families, that financial aid cycle starts and stops with them getting the admissions letter and a letter from the admissions office telling them that they qualify for a scholarship. They're happy and they say, I don't want anything else. And it could end there. But our office and the financial aid office recommends that you file the FAFSA and be considered for need-based aid, and also looking at government loans. So the financial aid process starts with doing the FAFSA as well. So that's how you get determined, determined for need-based aid. And it's the next step in that financial aid cycle, filing the FAFSA. People dread the FAFSA, but it's pretty simple to complete. Remember, the FAFSA for 2022-23 school year will be available this October 1st. The one, if you're planning on going to school in 21-22, it was available October 1st of 2020. So the need-based side of it, the next step starts with the FAFSA. Well, actually, it doesn't start with the FAFSA. It actually starts with you getting an FSA ID. This is kind of like your signature to the FAFSA, and it's the way that you can complete it. So applying for a FAFSA, requires that FSA ID. Keep in mind, this is not only for the students need that FSA ID to sign the FAFSA, but also the parents of dependent students need to apply for the FSA ID to make sure that they can sign the FAFSA with the students. Keep that ID handy, because not only is it used for the FAFSA for the first year, but you'll be using it for the FAFSA the second year, the third year, the fourth year. If you take out Stafford loans, you need to sign the promissory notes. So you need that FSA ID. Parents, if you're applying for PLUS loans, the FSA ID is the thing that lets you, go in and sign parent PLUS loan applications. So keep that FSA ID with you. Make sure that you keep it handy, because you'll be using it a lot if you apply for need-based aid or government loans. The feds are making this easier and easier to do the FAFSA. There's this thing called the data retrieval tool, which, before it was, you had to fill out all these things and have your taxes done and have it right next to the FAFSA. Right now, you could just say yes to the data retrieval tool. It'll just suck the information from your taxes that are on file right onto the FAFSA. There's a lot of questions on the FAFSA, and the most difficult ones are, which school code to use, like a Duquesne 003258 is our school code. There's a drop-down menu from the FAFSA. Select the school and select the code. That's probably going to be the most difficult thing that you'll have to do on the FAFSA. But there's a lot of questions on the FAFSA. And I know a lot of parents are always like a little edgy about this. And they say, hey, the FAFSA is really difficult. The questions really aren't that difficult, but it's those answers that you're given. Because you're thinking to yourself, like, why are they asking me, how many people are in my family? Why are they asking me what my assets are? Why are they asking me how old the oldest parent in the household is? What do those bureaucrats in DC think when I fill out the FAFSA? That's what gets people thinking about it. It's not so much that it's difficult answers, it's what are they thinking about my answers that I provide to the FAFSA? This is what happened. There is a method to the madness. Because the FAFSA is looking at income and looking a little bit at assets, but it's also looking at family, the number in college, the age of the parent. All these things adds up to this expected family contribution number that the FAFSA, ultimately winds up on. And if you think about it, the reason why they ask so many questions is, $80,000 AGI goes a lot farther with a family of 3 than it does $80,000 for a family of 8. So that's why they ask how many people are in the family. It's a little more, the expected family contribution is going to be lower for a bigger family. You don't want to lie about your age on the FAFSA, because the closer, the older you are, the closer to retirement you are. The closer to retirement you are, the more you're going to need your retirement assets. So there's more asset protection for the older parent on the FAFSA. All this thing gets added up to this expected family contribution number, which I hate that they call it an expected family contribution. That's what the Department of Ed says, but I don't like to think of it. It's really just a misnomer. It's really just a number, and it's just really an index. And soon, probably in the next couple of years, they're going to be changing it so it's not called expected family contributions, because it causes a lot of confusion for parents when they get that kind of number and they think, well, I'm going to be expected to pay zero, so I won't have to pay anything. It doesn't work that way. Here's how that expected family contribution number, or this index, works. A school will take the costs of an attendance, the things that you're billed for, the tuition, the room and board, things that the school bills you for. They also add indirect costs to this cost of attendance number. They'll take things that, hey, you're not going to be charged for by the university or college, but you're probably going to pay for things like books and back and forth to school for transportation. And they arrive at this cost of attendance number for the school. Now, the school's financial aid office will take that cost, subtract that expected family contribution number, the FAFSA score, from the cost, and that's how they determine what your need is. Remember at the beginning we said everybody has need, but only the government. Leave it to them to figure out a way to quantify your need. So the school costs $60,000, expected family contribution is 40, 60 minus 40, 20,000 would be the quantified need. And I see at the bottom of the slide, I have that included, this note, this little corollary. Any gift aid that will reduce the financial need. So, if you have 60,000, EFC is 40, you have 20,000, but you get a $20,000 scholarship, that reduces your need on top of it because it's gift money that reduces that cost. So that's the little corollary. Cost minus EFC is the need, minus any gift aid reduces the need even further. The types of aid, the financial aid that you get, is obviously the gift aid we were talking about. The scholarships when you apply to a school in the application process. And then there's grants that come from the FAFSA and need-based grants that could come from the school or from the federal government or state governments. There's also additional aid, which we kind of call self-help, like in the form of work study and loans. This comes right from doing the FAFSA. Now on, taking a deeper dive into gift aid, the scholarships, like we said, in our school, in a lot of places, that's when you're admitted. That's what the admissions office looks at and says, we're just going to award this as a scholarship based on merit. There could be outside scholarships. There's, scholarship searches like FastWeb, things like that. Locally, the Pittsburgh Foundation has a lot of outside scholarships that you could apply for. All those things are independent of your FAFSA. They're just based on merit. And they're all things that could bring that cost lower and reduce that financial need. So that's all things that you bring without doing the FAFSA. Next on that slide shows you the things that come from the FAFSA. The grants like the Pell Grant. Typically this past year, if you scored 5711 or lower as an EFC score, you qualified for the Pell Grant. Now, along with the Pell Grant is this thing called SEOG, Supplemental Education Opportunity Grants. It's kind of like the feds give us a school like SEOG money. Some schools have it, some schools don't. It's like a pot of money, and you've got to piece it out to people, and it's meant to supplement that Pell Grant, Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. And it depends on, a lot of times your allotment that you get from the federal government, that depends on what you might qualify for SEOG. With the Pell Grant, you score this on your FAFSA, you'll get this. It's cut and dry. SEOG, it varies from school to school. Some schools have a bigger pot of money, some not. Some have a lot more students, and so the pot doesn't go as far. Next, if you're a Pennsylvania resident going to Pennsylvania schools, a lot of times you can get what's called the FIA grants. That's typically I see that, kind of like if you score 12,000 EFC or lower, you can qualify for the FIA grant. It's for Pennsylvania residents going to Pennsylvania schools. They can go out of state, but there's not as much money if you go to Ohio with the FIA grant. You may not qualify for as much if you go to a school out of state. And finally, there's university grants as well. That all comes from doing the FAFSA. The other thing that comes from doing the FAFSA, work study. It's not a credit that will appear on your bill, but it's doing campus jobs. It's federal dollars that's paying your paycheck. Here at Duquesne, it's awarded on a need basis. So it all comes from doing the FAFSA. The next thing that's on there is Stafford loans. Any parent that does a FAFSA with the student, that student can get a Stafford loan. You could be Bill Gates rich and still get $5,500 in Stafford loans. The question is, can you qualify for some of that Stafford loan to be need-based or subsidized? And that's where it comes into the subsidized Stafford loans are what's called interest-free loans for the students. And that's based on need, that formula, cost, EFC, minus any gift aid. If you have some unmet need, up to $3,500 of that $5,500 Stafford loan can be subsidized, no interest on it. And roughly 55% of our undergraduate population receives a subsidized loan. And that's real savings for those students that take out loans because the interest is interest-free as long as they're in school. If they go to med, a student was in here into my office this afternoon, he's planning on going here and then going to med school. And I told him, well, your subsidized loan will be subsidized while you go to med school, interest-free. The savings are really great on those things if you can qualify for it. Finally, there are some what's called health profession loans. That goes to typically our nursing students, pharmacy students may qualify for those things. It is based on need. It's also based on that pot of money idea. The government gives us a pot of money, says, give this out to nursing students. There's only so much of it, so we try to parse it out, tranche it out to people as best we can, but it only goes so far. The last step of the cycle, like I said, to kind of organize this all together is just figuring out and calculating your costs. And this is the part where, you want to ask yourself when you're looking at that final number and doing the numbers. Remember, typically the schools will bill, per semester or by quarter. So when you see that bottom line of this is what I owe, remember, it's usually billed by semester, half in the fall, half in the spring if it's a semester school. If it's not, if you couldn't do it in half and half, there's payment plans that you can do. There's some wonderful people on the line with us tonight that, deal in 529 plans and things like that. Those are the things that you want to check with them. See about the 529s that you could do. Look at things like be creative. Sometimes people have come in and said, hey, I refinanced and I got a good deal on a loan to refinance for some of these costs that I could, do myself and finance myself. Always try to pay as much as you can. Payment plans. If not, there's things like Parent Plus loans that you could finance the difference. If parents wanted to take that out, you would go to that same website to take out a Parent Plus loan to apply for your son and daughter if you're a dependent student. That's federal dollars. If you were not able to, or you wanted to do something different, you could look at private education loans, alternative education loans. Those are not federal dollars. That usually is the student that is taking those things out. And the student would need to have a good cosigner on it. So if you're looking at alternative education loans, make sure that you can line up a good cosigner just so the student gets approved for the loan and gets the best possible interest rates. Finally, keep in mind, there are tax credits out there. And so the things that you could do right now, I would tell anyone, whether your son or daughter is in kindergarten all the way to senior year in high school, meet with these financial planners, discuss your portfolio, decide what you want to do, ask them constantly, every year meet with them to say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm planning. If you're going to borrow, get an annual credit report. You don't want to find out when you go to apply that there's something on your credit report that doesn't belong there and you can't get approved for a loan. I have some resources listed. We have a nice little booklet on our website about financing your college education. IRS publication 970, great thing to look at. FAFSA forecaster, if you want to take a look at what your FAFSA will look like, you could do that. There's certain education writers that I recommend out there that do a really good job of planning. Finally, the most important thing you could do right now, not only the finances, go to this thing called the college scorecard. The federal government has this thing called the college scorecard. It's a way that they rate schools, they look at schools, they're looking at the cost, they're looking at the makeup of the students there, if they could retain those students, their graduation rates, their loan default rates, and most importantly, they all have something showing what the net cost of a particular school is. So you could get an idea of like, hey, you know, I know the tuition is this, but what am I going to pay if I'm making my adjusted gross income as a certain amount? So all those things can help out. I want to thank you all for, coming out to this thing. And I want to thank you for looking into this right now and planning ahead. And I want to thank Jonathan and Kaylee. I always refer people to, hey, go to your 529 administrator, go talk to them. And hats off to you guys that can make this a reality for people and get them planning and thinking. And man, I can't thank you enough for having the opportunity to speak.
I appreciate it, John. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them into the box. John, one thing I will follow up, and Kaylee and I kind of did this last month, was we noticed a lot of people who went into a profession thinking, especially in the teaching profession, which is, kind of where we're focused on, they knew they were going to go in, become teachers and do stuff like that, but they didn't actually investigate the loans until after they graduated, and they realized that if they got a federal loan instead of a private loan, they could have had it forgiven under certain programs and stuff like that. So one thing I would tell people is, especially if you've got kids that are thinking about going to college, look on the back end too. Look to see if they're going to be an engineer, if they're going to be a doctor or a nurse or a teacher. There are a lot of programs out there that will help forgive some of those loans depending on their profession, and to make sure that you're matching up the loans that you get to the forgiveness programs that are available out there too. Because we have seen unfortunately, a lot of people who have gotten loans that could have been forgiven, but they got private loans instead of federal loans, and they're still paying them 20 years after, graduating school. So, different programs, different things, let us know, let Kaylee or me know if you have questions on that. But John, again, I really appreciate you coming out and kind of educating, everybody about the process and how everything works. At this point, I really don't have any questions. I'm going to just double check my emails here because I did have a couple people who were not able to attend, but nope, I think we're all set. So what I'm going to do for those that were not able to attend, we're going to send this recording out to all the school districts so that you guys can watch this on your own time. Rewatch this because John just hit you with a ton of information. It might take 1 or 2 times to rewatch this to let it all sink in. So we have the recordings for you guys. If anytime you have questions, feel free to give Kaylee, me, or John a call or an email. And again, we appreciate you guys coming out this evening and learning a little bit more. Thank you and have a good night.